Yeah, so the latest here in Tanzania is that 20 people have now died in this earthquake. 7 of those were children, and at least 269 people were injured. Those are the figures from the Red Cross, who are helping with the rescue effort. I haven't heard that from the government or the authorities, but seems in line with what was reported from the authorities earlier today. It's now almost, more than 24 hours since the quake happened yesterday afternoon. This evening, the Prime Minister of Tanzania travelled to the region that's affected. That's the region around Lake Victoria in the northwest of Tanzania. It's the closest big city is called Bukoba. That was actually quite close to the epicenter of this earthquake. It has a population of 70,000 people, so there were many people who would have been affected by this. Tonight, the Prime Minister travelled there. He took part in a burial mass, a memorial service to remember those who were killed.
Lucy, take us through the recovery efforts. How are they going presently?
Well, I spoke earlier to a representative from the Red Cross. They're leading the rescue efforts there, along with the government. He told me that yesterday, after the quake happened, the local hospitals were overwhelmed because of the number of injuries, and also because this is a region which just isn't prepared for a disaster of this kind of scale. It's by and large a fairly rural region as well as a big city. It's also a fairly poor area of the country, not one with good infrastructure. There were many houses destroyed, people whose homes have been damaged. There were no shelters for those people to stay in. They just had to find relatives or neighbours or local buildings to shelter in. And the hospitals at one point were even said to be running low on medicine. But over the last 24 hours, many people have stepped in to help. The local private clinics and pharmacies have lended their support to the medical effort. And I'm told now that the situation is stable. So hopefully, everybody has stepped up to help those affected. Of course, what happens now, who knows? We're expecting that possibly the death toll will continue to rise. I spoke to another resident of Bukoba earlier today who felt that earthquake. He said from what he's seen, the damage around his home and his area, he expected that there'd be more people announced dead once the authorities have managed to collect proper information than we currently know of at the moment.
Now, there's various reports about the actual death toll. Can you confirm for us exactly how many people died?
Well, as I said, I've spoken to the Red Cross. He told me just in the last hour or so that the current death toll is 20. 13 of those were adults, 7 were children. There are reports that some of those were pupils at a school in Bukoba, which is why, several of those were children. Other than that, the government has given different numbers through the day, but it is steadily rising. So it would seem as though 20 is the correct figure as we know it at the moment.
Now, earthquakes are fairly common in the Great Lakes region. Have there been any earthquakes with a greater intensity as this one in the past?
There have been earthquakes of greater intensity over the course of history. Tanzania is on a fault line. It's part of the Great Rift Valley, which stretches across quite a lot of East Africa. So there are earthquakes here. This isn't completely out the blue, but they're not very common. It seems to be every decade or so. And the last major one was back in 2007 and slightly further east towards the city of Arusha. So to this particular community affected today, it's not something they were prepared for. It's not something that they were expecting. And indeed, among the infrastructure, one of the reasons that so many people have been injured is because the houses there aren't particularly strong to withstand this sort of disaster. This also is a fairly significant earthquake. It measured 5.7 on the Richter scale. It was felt as far as Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, as well as Tanzania. So this is something that, is fairly strong, and that's why we're seeing these effects.
And the tremors have been felt as far afield as Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi and Kenya. Any casualties at this point, do we know?
Yeah, there have been reports of casualties in Uganda. That's not something that I've had confirmed myself, though. So far, it seems as though the majority of the damage is here in Tanzania, particularly in that city of Bukoba. And even among those who haven't been killed or been injured, there are many people who've lost homes, buildings have fallen down, parts of the property have been damaged. I spoke to one man last night, just after this had happened, who's lost his family home. His mother and siblings were actually inside the house when the house came down. So obviously terrible, the death toll and the number of injuries, but as well as that, there will be many, many people waking up tomorrow morning to start the week by rebuilding their homes and starting to rebuild their lives.
Well, the last time we heard from the government was actually last night when the presidency issued a statement that the president is actually shocked at this. Has the president or perhaps the government come on board in the rescue efforts?
Yeah, so it's the Prime Minister who's leading that tonight. He's actually travelled to the region, to the city of Bukoba. He took part in a burial mass for those who had been killed in this earthquake. He led the memorial service there. I spoke to the President's spokesman earlier this evening, and he said there will be further statements to come, but for the moment it's the Prime Minister who is leading that. Tomorrow actually is a public holiday here in Tanzania. It's the Muslim festival of Eid, so possibly, that might make things more difficult for the authorities, but they are involved and they are trying to lead the effort as much as they can.
All right, Lucy, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Good evening.
That was Lucy Taylor, our correspondent in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. She's been on the site of the earthquake tragedy, and she continues to give us an update as the story unfolds. Well, SABC will continue to give you an update as it unfolds.